The night I signed the $8.4 million pipeline deal, nobody was left in the office except me, the vending machine repair guy, and a fruit fly dive bombing my Red Bull. The sales team had already pieced out to some overpriced rooftop bar, celebrating early, like they'd had a single thing to do with it. They hadn't. This wasn't one of those we did it moments. It was a you finally shut up and let me work moment. I'd spent 3 straight months mapping out the entire regional flow, beating out 2 unicorns and an Amazon pilot program just to land this exclusive. And for what? A Slack emoji react and a bonus that still needed 3 signatures. I remember staring at the numbers, the ink barely dry, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd finally get credit without having to wrestle it from someone's cold, calloused ego. We were entering Series B prep. Growth projections mattered more than ever, and I'd just handed them the golden goose with a tracking spreadsheet and embedded API calculator. That night, I locked the final model, titled it Lock V4 Final, and emailed a copy to myself like I always did. I don't trust cloud storage. I don't trust shared drives. And I especially don't trust men named Brad who spell through as through in legal documents. If you've made it this far into the story and you like where it's going, do me one quick favor. Subscribe and like the video. Seriously, 97% of people who listen to these never hit that button, and it's the only thing that tells the team we're doing something right. Now back to the part where everything quietly starts going to hell. The CEO, Ron, mid-50s, Patagonia vest over business casual like he's cosplaying cool founder, was already prepping our next pitch deck. I knew the slides he was using, knew the line graphs, because I built them. That was the unspoken arrangement. I made the machine and he posed next to it for Forbes. I didn't mind, honestly. I wasn't looking for magazine covers. I just wanted the metrics to live, the strategy to hold, the model to scale. I remember pausing before shutting down my laptop that night. I stood up, stretched, and walked past the CEO's glass office, door cracked open, lights off. But on his desk, I spotted it, my pipeline roadmap, printed, scribbled on, highlighted like a crime scene. Good. At least someone was reading it. I headed home without a clue that within days that same roadmap would be pitched to investors by someone who didn't even know which column triggered the forecast cascade, and that the person pitching it would be the reason my name got erased from the future of the company I helped build. But that night was perfect. I hit every number, beat every forecast, closed the biggest deal of the quarter, maybe the year. I was finally starting to believe the bonus would hit my account without a fight. And then came Ivy, Ron's daughter, fresh off a Kellogg MBA and 10-day ayahuasca cleanse in Costa Rica. She walked in the next morning like she'd invented vertical SaaS and spiritual capitalism in the same breath. Interim COO, the email said, effective immediately. I'd been here 3 years. She'd been here 3 minutes. And suddenly, she was my new boss. But that's next. And trust me, you're going to want to hear how that hoodie enters the picture. Ron called an all-hands for 9:01 odd a.m. sharp, something he hadn't done since the pre-pandemic era when he used to quote Steve Jobs over breakfast burritos like it was gospel. Half the company piled into the main conference room, the rest on Zoom, expecting some typical "we're crushing it" update. What we got instead was a TED Talk in nepotism. Ivy strolled in 5 minutes late, black turtleneck, silk wide-leg trousers, and the kind of smug smile you only get from winning the genetic lottery and growing up with a wine cellar named after you. Ron introduced her like we should already be standing and applauding. She's bringing fresh leadership for the next chapter, he beamed, ignoring the fact that her resume could have fit on a La Croix can. Ivy flipped her hair, nodded toward the room, and started talking about modernizing synergies and lean executive structures. She used the word optimization 5 times in 2 minutes and never once mentioned revenue. My stomach tightened. By noon, 2 department leads were reporting to people they didn't even know. Operations lost oversight of vendor compliance. Marketing got merged with product under a guy named Trent, who once spelled logistics with a J in a client email. I found myself reporting directly to Ivy, which was like being told to hand over your Formula One car to someone who just got their learner's permit on a Peloton. Still, I stayed professional, kept things tight. I sent her a performance summary showing we hit every single metric on my bonus agreement. Revenue milestones, churn thresholds, partner expansion, all met, all signed. No wiggle room. She ghosted me for 4 days, then finally replied with, Let's put a pin in that for now. Reassessing comp frameworks. No signature, no greeting. Just that. I forwarded her response to the CFO. He didn't reply either. When I ran into him near the espresso machine, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Just stared at the beans like they were going to tell him how to escape the conversation. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just Ivy throwing her weight around. This was a freeze out. I was being slowly erased. She started reassigning parts of my team without so much as a Slack ping. I'd log into our project hub and find deliverables shifted to Trent or someone in finance who'd never touched a growth model in their life. My access to the Series B prep folder? Revoked. When I asked about it, Ivy said, "Oh, must be a permissions bug. You know how these platforms are." Sure. Must have been the same bug that stripped my name off 3 internal docs and pushed a Q2 forecast revised file with formatting identical to mine, except now with Ivy's initials in the metadata. The kicker came from HR. I stopped by to ask if my bonus paperwork was finally moving. Figured maybe it got lost in the shuffle. That's when Lila, our HR lead and one of the last decent people left, leaned in and whispered, "Just so you're aware. Ivy's looking at executive reshuffles. You didn't hear that from me." Then she shut her laptop like she hadn't said a thing. That night, I sat in my car for 20 minutes before driving home. Engine running. Just still. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't sad either. I was watching the walls of a house I built get painted over in real time, and nobody even had the decency to tell me the new color. I thought about marching into Ron's office, demanding answers. But instead, I went home. Opened my laptop, pulled up the original bonus contract, took screenshots, every clause, every milestone hit, backed up the emails, synced the model to my local drive. Then I poured a glass of bourbon and stared at that Q2 forecast doc again. She didn't just borrow my work. She was rewriting history with it. She scheduled it like a dentist appointment. 15 minutes, quick catch-up. In that sterile tone HR uses when they already know your desk's about to be empty. I stepped into her office at 10:02 a.m., coffee still warm in my hand, thinking maybe, just maybe, this was about that budget realignment I'd flagged. Instead, she was leaning against the windowsill like she was about to audition for a Peloton ad, arms folded, eyes lit up like she was about to deliver her favorite TED Talk yet. She didn't ask me to sit, just launched in like we'd already had the fight and I'd already lost. "You're not what we need going forward," she said, breezy as hell. "We're pivoting, looking for a more culture-forward fit." Culture forward. This from a woman who once told the DevOps led his beard gave off janitor vibes. I blinked, slow. "You're firing me," she smiled like she was granting me a gift. "Let's not call it that. We're transitioning. Here, this is for you." She reached into a paper bag next to her standing desk and pulled out a branded company hoodie. Black, medium, still tagged, and a $50 Amazon gift card with a Post-it stuck to it that said, "For coffee" or whatever, in her curling, high school girl handwriting. I stared at it like she'd just handed me a participation trophy for surviving a house fire. "The bonus," I said calmly. "The contractually guaranteed bonus. We hit the numbers. All 3 metrics. You acknowledge that." She tilted her head like a therapist pretending to care. "We're revisiting how we define performance in this new chapter. I'd love for you to see this as a clean slate, a chance to take what you've learned here and apply it. Somewhere that fits you better. Somewhere that fits me better." I glanced at the CFO, seated stiffly to the side like an unwilling hostage. He couldn't even look up, just kept clicking his pen. Over and over. The same guy who toasted my forecast at the last board dinner now acting like I didn't exist. I was halfway through rehearsing every lawsuit-worthy clause in my head when something clicked, and I swallowed it. I didn't fight. Didn't bark or plead or threaten litigation. I just signed the exit paperwork, folded the hoodie neatly under my arm, picked up the gift card, and nodded once, silent as a burial. But as I turned to leave, I saw it. On the edge of Ivy's desk, peeking out from under a pair of gold-rimmed blue light glasses was a manila folder, typed neatly on the tab, "Investor Forecast, Q2, Revised." My gut dropped. I'd know that layout anywhere. She hadn't just taken the model. I could already picture the graphs, the partner pipeline, the optimized churn slope I spent a week tuning like a Stradivarius. And now it was revised, whatever that meant in Ivy speak. probably scrubbed of my name, probably rebranded as Executive Strategy Innovation or whatever horseshit McKinsey echo chamber she marinated in. I kept walking, out of her office, past the glass conference room where half the execs were pretending not to see me, past the desk where Lila from HR was chewing her lip, eyes already wet like she knew this was wrong but couldn't stop it. Out the front doors, into the parking lot where the heat felt like punishment. I threw the hoodie into the passenger seat. It landed like a body. I stared at it for a second. The company logo printed across the chest like some inside joke I wasn't part of anymore. 100K gone, 3 years erased. And for what? A hoodie, a gift card, and the vague promise that maybe I'd find a better fit. What they didn't know, what Ivy hadn't even thought to check, was that the investor forecast she just revised was tied to more than just projections. It was tied to people, and one of those people was me. The day after they fired me, I didn't shower, didn't eat. I sat in a stretched-out hoodie from a different job I'd actually loved, flipping through the exit packet like it might apologize. The silence was unbearable. No Slacks, no calendar pings, no 6 p.m. deck requests from Ron pretending he knew how to copy-paste into Google Slides. My phone had gone cold, except for one new notification. Access revoked. Just like that, years of models, team notes, pitch decks, and growth simulations, gone. They didn't just cut me loose. They buried the body. I opened the last version of my personal cap table tracking doc. It was something I kept out of habit because I never fully trusted our CFO's weekly summaries. Call it paranoia or preparation. I pulled up the latest Series B prep memo I'd saved. A PDF attached to an early investor brief marked confidential but sent out before Ivy had her claws in the process. I skimmed it, then read it again, slower. Halfway down page 9, buried under dry legalese and equity disclaimers, was the line, "Key operator, retention condition, release of funds contingent on continued engagement of Director of Growth. See Appendix D, PG 43. I sat back in my chair. That was me. They used my full legal name in Appendix D. It wasn't vague or symbolic or subject to board approval. It was a clause, a lever, a tripwire. They'd built the round on my operational stability. My growth forecasting was considered integral. They'd pitched me, then axed me without even checking the clause. This wasn't just corporate betrayal. It was idiocy wrapped in hubris. And Ivy, in her quest to cleanse the culture, hadn't bothered to ask what kept the walls standing. I didn't explode, didn't pace or scream or call a lawyer. I just filed the memo away, made a few copies, saved a hard copy in my fireproof box with my birth certificate and old tax returns. Then I logged into my encrypted workspace, one Ivy never knew about, and opened the original Series B deck I'd built 6 weeks before she showed up. At 6:43 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Dean, my former junior analyst, smart kid, big eyes, nervous smile, used to triple-check my math even when I said it was final. The message was short. "She's using your deck, word for word." He attached a screenshot. My graph, my labels, my damn color scheme. Same retention funnel, same month-over-month growth leap I'd been refining since February. The watermark was missing, but I'd recognize my own work if someone used it as toilet paper. I texted him one line. "Keep everything. Don't forward. Don't edit. Just archive it all." He didn't ask questions, just replied, "Done." I sat there for a long time in the blue glow of my monitor, fingers drumming on the edge of the keyboard. They'd taken my bonus, erased my name, repurposed my projections, and tried to pass it all off like it was new vision. But in doing so, they'd built their whole pitch on a clause they hadn't read, a clause that said, "No me, no money." And that wasn't just pride talking. That was the architecture, the legal foundation. The thing you don't find until you're reading on page 43 at 2 a.m, blinking at your own name. I wasn't going back, but I wasn't done either. I didn't go on some scorched earth crusade. No cryptic LinkedIn rants, no emails to the board, just silence. The kind that rattles people more than rage ever could. I wasn't interested in lawsuits or ego fencing with a girl who thought POC meant pitch our culture. What I wanted was clean correction. No spotlight, no drama, just truth dropped in the right inbox at the right time. So I made tea, put on a record, opened a blank email to Parker Eastman. Subject, FYI, retention clause, Series B. Parker and I go back 6 years. He was one of the sharpest operators I ever met. Ran diligence like a surgeon, no wasted motion. I'd helped him during a messy product market fit advisory stint 3 years ago. Quiet gig, no LinkedIn tag. But we kept in touch. I knew he was now with Sycamore Crest Ventures, one of the co-leads on our Series B. I didn't send a pitch. I didn't complain. I attached 2 files, my signed termination letter and the Series B investor memo with a single line highlighted in yellow. Key operator, retention condition. No subject line dramatics, no bullet-pointed grievances. Just one note beneath the attachments. Assume this clause is still active. I'm no longer with the company as of last week. Make of that what you will. Sent. Nothing more. Then I unplugged. Literally, shut the laptop, went outside, watered my dying rosemary bush, slept. The next day, Parker replied with 3 words. Call in 15? We didn't waste time on small talk. You really out? He asked, voice low. Signed, sealed, hoodied, I said. He exhaled. Jesus, they didn't even flag this. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He continued. You're listed in both term sheets as key personnel, ops backbone. We pushed the clause through ourselves. Didn't want fluff. Wanted foundation. They cut the foundation last Tuesday, I said. Silence. You want back in? No, I said. I want accuracy. If they're going to pitch my roadmap, they can't do it while pretending I'm still there. Parker whistled softly. You're playing this cold. It's not revenge. It's correction. You can decide what that means on your end. He didn't argue. Pitch is Thursday, he said. I know. You're not coming. No, I said. But you are. And that folder they hand you? You're going to want to read page 3 slowly. He chuckled once, but it was grim. Noted. We hung up. No NDA signed, no favors owed, just a quiet handoff. They wanted to sell a story. That's fine. But I wrote the first draft. And you don't get to cut the author, then sell the book. Ivy walked into the investor pitch like she was hosting the damn Met Gala. Hair sleeked back, black blazer buttoned like a war general, and that smug, lipless smile she wore any time she felt 2 clicks ahead in a room of people who couldn't punch back. Ron followed close behind, wearing his signature startup dad vest and that dumb grin he always saved for rooms with money. He opened with a line about intergenerational synergy, like he was passing the torch instead of handing over a bomb with the pin pulled. The Series B pitch was hosted at a boutique VC office downtown. Clean wood, clean glass, not a cord in sight. Every detail said, "We make money quietly." Parker was already seated, calm and unreadable, flipping through a printout like it was a lunch menu he'd seen too many times. The other partner, Melissa, sharp eyes, even sharper pencil skirt, had the financials packet open, pen in hand. Ivy didn't notice the silence. She was too busy rearranging her papers like they were tarot cards predicting $1 billion valuation. Let's begin, she chirped. The screen lit up with a familiar slide. My slide. Same gradient, same margin quirks I'd spent hours nudging into place because the branding team had more strategic things to do. She started talking about post-churn recapture loops like she invented the concept last week while drinking mushroom tea. Then she launched into the growth model, smiling like she could taste the term sheet already. This growth trajectory, she said, tapping the slide like a magician revealing a rabbit, was re-architected under my leadership in Q2, aligning with our culture-forward reinvention strategy. My chart. My numbers. My sequence. She hadn't changed a damn formula, just renamed the tab from Todd Forecast to Ops 2.0. Ron leaned in, added his own theater. What you're seeing here is bold generational change. We've moved from legacy growth tactics to agile cultural positioning. Translation. We fired the adult and handed the keys to my daughter, who once ran a startup-themed wine club in grad school. Melissa nodded politely. Parker remained stone still. The pitch rolled on. Ivy fielded questions with fake humility, overused phrases like, "We're excited for what's next," and enough buzzwords to suffocate a TEDx stage. No one mentioned the missing operator. No one said my name. Then Parker lifted his head and asked casually, "Before we move to appendix terms, can we confirm executive roster stability for due diligence?" Ron blinked. Of course, all stable, fully aligned. Melissa chimed in, flipping to the last page. Could we get updated cap table amendments and any recent exec transitions documented formally? Ivy didn't flinch. Absolutely. We've already incorporated all relevant shifts. Clean structure, no pending changes. Parker nodded slowly, like he was waiting for her to say more. Then, still calm, he asked, "And this reflects all current executive status, yes?" Ivy smiled too quickly. Yes, completely current. He tapped his pen against the folder in front of him. Once. Twice. Good, he said. Nothing else. The room moved on, but something shifted. A ripple. Ivy didn't catch it, too high on her own pitch fumes. But Ron did. His smile faltered for a second. The room had gotten colder. Melissa made a small note in the margin and turned the page. Ivy closed with a slide titled Next Horizon, full of vague words like velocity and scale. Parker didn't look up. He just turned to page 3 and underlined one sentence once, in blue ink. I wasn't in the room, but I was about to walk back in anyway, through a clause they hadn't even bothered to read. Parker didn't interrupt. He just let the show play out, page by page, until Ivy ran out of slides and breath. She closed her laptop with a polished little snap, like she'd just dropped the mic at a founder retreat, then leaned back with her arms folded, scanning the room like a cat that thinks it just killed something important. Melissa gave a brief, polite clap. Ron smiled like a man who didn't realize the light above his seat was actually a sniper laser. And then Parker cleared his throat. Not loud, not sharp, just enough to reset the air. Appreciate the overview, he said quietly. Then he picked up the due diligence folder, thicker than any doc Ron had probably read in his career, and began flipping through. Page 2, page 5, page 9. The table of executive roles, compensation structures, transitional changes. Silence. Ivy was still half smiling, like this was the part where they pat her on the head and say she's brilliant. Then came the pause. Parker stopped on page 17. Didn't speak, just stared. His pen came out, smooth and slow. He drew a neat circle around a line halfway down the page. Retention of Mr. My Name as Director of Growth is a condition precedent to Series B release. No frills, no asterisks, no ambiguity. Condition precedent. He underlined it once, folded the page slightly, then slid the entire folder, slowly, like a quiet guillotine, across the table to Ron. The CEO leaned in, confused. Read the line, blinked, then read it again, slower. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked to Ivy, who was frozen mid-breath, smile twitching like a glitching gif. She tried to laugh. I think that clause is outdated. He's not with us anymore. Parker raised an eyebrow. We know. Melissa straightened her spine slightly, like she was bracing for impact. Ron turned to the GC, seated near the end of the table. Mid-50s, graying, corporate law relic in a blazer too tight. The GC cleared his throat with a dry cough, then leaned forward and whispered, "That clause is active. It's tied to the initial draft you signed. The amendment never got finalized. Legal didn't." He stopped, stared at Parker. Ivy blinked hard. "We revised the deck. We updated the model. We moved on." Parker leaned back, calm, controlled. "No one's arguing the deck. We're talking about the terms, the ones you all signed and apparently forgot to read." Ron looked like he'd swallowed a belt. Ivy reached for her laptop, maybe to pull up some alternate doc, some quick justification, but Parker held up one hand, palm flat. "We're not interested in reinterpreting language. We're interested in alignment. This," he tapped the circled line, "is not aligned." Silence. No one moved. Not the partners, not the GC, not even Ron, who'd finally gone full pale like a man realizing the bridge is already burning and he's standing barefoot on the gas can. Ivy started to say something else, but nothing came out. Not a defense, not a plan. Just one sharp breath and a paper shuffle that sounded way too loud in the quiet. The pitch was over. But the reckoning? That was just one sentence away. Parker didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just closed the folder with surgical finality, placed both hands on the table, and leaned in slightly toward Ron like he was about to explain how a heart monitor worked to someone mid-cardiac arrest. "So," he said, calm as still water, "you terminated the one person we backed this round on?" Ron opened his mouth but only managed a dry, well, before glancing sideways at Ivy, like maybe she'd prepared a rescue slide. She hadn't. I mean, Ivy began, smoothing her blouse like that would help her tone. What we did was pivot strategically. We felt the company needed a different kind of operator to match our evolving internal culture. We're focusing forward, not backward. It was about direction? Parker cut in. The word was sharp, but not loud. You want to talk direction? You just cut the spine of your company. Ivy's lips parted, but she didn't speak. Melissa flipped open her own folder with perfect timing and pulled out a single page. It was crisp, clean, probably printed 5 minutes before the meeting. She slid it next to Parker without saying a word. He lifted it, held it by one corner, and turned it for the room to see. Term Sheet Addendum 3C, he said, tapping the clause near the top. No release of funds if key operational personnel are removed without prior written board consent. Signed by your legal counsel. Initialed by your CEO, dated 6 weeks ago. He dropped the page. It landed like a verdict. Ron's face looked like someone had just told him how Wi-Fi works for the first time and also that it was being revoked. His jaw flexed. His hands went into his lap. He didn't speak. Ivy's pivot melted fast. Okay, but the models are sound. The roadmap's still intact. We revised the projections. Revised projections don't override binding agreements, Melissa said flatly. Especially not ones tied to capital release. Parker added. Ivy's voice cracked slightly. We believe the clause wouldn't be material since we restructured the growth path. You believed wrong, Parker said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult her. But it hit harder than if he'd stood up and flipped the table. The GC started rifling through his briefcase, fingers shaking slightly. We were under the impression that the amendment would... It didn't, Parker snapped, just once. You never filed it. We never approved it. And you never disclosed his departure. That's concealment, not realignment. Ron finally spoke, voice brittle. We didn't think... No, Parker interrupted. You didn't. The air was dead still. Melissa clicked her pen and made another note. Ron looked like a child caught joyriding in his father's car, realizing he wrecked it into the investor's front lawn. Ivy sat back, shoulders rigid, lips pressed into a white line. Her confidence drained down her designer blouse like cold sweat. You could almost hear her trying to calculate if there was still a version of the conversation where she came out clean. There wasn't. Parker leaned back in his chair, slow and deliberate. We backed a company with a backbone. You removed it without asking, and now you expect us to believe the skeleton will dance just fine on its own. No one spoke. No one moved. Because they all knew. It was over. Parker didn't stand right away. He gave them a few more seconds, like a doctor lingering before pulling the sheet over the patient. No one moved. Ivy stared at some invisible point above Melissa's shoulder, jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscles twitch. Ron sat slumped, hands steepled under his chin like he was praying. But to what? God, the board, or the ghost of common sense wasn't clear. Then Parker glanced at his watch. One smooth motion. He rose to his feet, adjusted the cuff of his shirt, fastened the button on his blazer, then looked Ron dead in the eyes. We're pulling out. No preamble, no softening language, just that. A surgical cut that severed months of effort, dreams, and pretense. Ron flinched. Parker, wait, just let us regroup. We can revise. Parker didn't even blink. Revise with who? He asked quietly. You terminated your clause-triggered operator. You violated disclosure protocol. You doctored projections on a foundation you didn't build. This round is over. Melissa closed her folder. Tapped it once. That was her goodbye. Then Parker turned toward the door, but before he left, he paused just long enough to deliver the final line. No flourish, no anger, just quiet, undeniable truth. Well done, he said to Ron, voice flat. You just lost your company. He didn't wait for a reply, just walked out. Melissa followed. The door clicked shut behind them. Inside the room, no one breathed. Ron looked hollow. Ivy was still frozen in her chair, the blood drained from her face, hands limp in her lap. The GC slowly lowered his glasses and muttered something to himself that sounded like a prayer or a resignation. No one touched the folder. It sat wide open in the middle of the table, the circled claws glowing under the overhead lights like a brand burned into paper. Down the hall, the receptionist began clearing coffee cups from the investor spread. The lobby music resumed. Business as usual, except it wasn't. Back at headquarters, my old desk remained untouched. Third row by the window. They hadn't reassigned it yet. My nameplate still hung from the cubicle edge. On the chair, the hoodie, the one Ivy handed me like a consolation prize, still in its plastic wrap, untouched, forgotten. Inside the pocket of that hoodie, tucked deep, right against the stitching, I'd left one printed page, a photocopy of the term sheet, clause highlighted. My name, unchanged, indispensable. They took the face off the company, thinking no one would notice the missing heartbeat. Now, all that was left was silence, and a vacant desk with a folded hoodie and a clause that never expired.